Hello everyone, welcome to Newswatch. This is our chance to speak live with newsmakers attending the Women Deliver 2019 conference. I'm Hannah Vaughan-Jones, it's my pleasure to be here, and I'm joined around this table by, we have Suzanne Biegel. Suzanne is the founder of Catalyst at Large. Joy Anderson of the Criterion Institute, Dr. Mary-Anne Etiebet. Did I get that right? I think I did. Executive Director and Lead of Merck for Mothers. We're going to hear much more about that later on. Also, Jess Tomlin is with us, and Jess is the CEO of the Match International Women's Fund. Suzanne, I'm going to start with you. You specialize in something called gender smart investing. So to kick things off, let's just go with the basics here. What is gender smart investing? Why do we need it?
Okay. Some people call it gender lens investing, gender smart investing. This is about intentionally looking at gender as a factor that is relevant in all investments and saying where can you find opportunity and where can you see risk from paying attention to gender. Now, let me break that down a little bit. That might be about investing in women entrepreneurs. It might be about investing in companies that have women throughout their leadership, their governance, their employees, their value chains. It might be about those companies that are selling products and services to women and really tapping into the women's market. Mm-hmm. It might be about companies that are really focused on the supply chain and really who is employing a lot of women in the supply chain and more, but on its basic level, it's tapping into thinking about where gender patterns and gender trends give us an opportunity, a viewfinder to seeing opportunity or risk.
Okay, and now Joy, I know you guys work together a lot.
We work together a lot of times.
So you know a lot about this as well. You're more focused on gender-based violence, is that right?
So we're focused broadly on the field of gender lens investing. Like Suzanne, we're one of the folks who started this field, built it over the last 10 years, and really worked to. Thank you. It has been an amazing ride.
And especially over the last couple of days, it seems, as well.
Well, I would say in the last 6 months or so, we're just on because a lot of the commitments that are being announced here are part of a massive, it's a moment where issues around gender, women's rights are just taking off. And in my mind, just sitting here and I look at the 8,000 people here, for me, what gender lens investing is about taking this stunning brains, energy, passion, smarts, knowledge on the ground, human beings who are the long distance runners on this issue, and having them stand full, face on with Wall Street or venture capitalists to say what these people here know matters to how we calculate and make investment decisions. And for me, that's just the core, that what they know matters.
So how is it working then? I mean, how is the momentum picked up so much over the last 6 months to be at the position where you are all now?
Well, so I think there's a couple things. I mean, I would say two big trends, and you can build on this. One is the wealth transfer. So over the last 5 or 10 years, a lot of the momentum behind gender lens investing has been from private wealth that says 65% of women change their advisors upon the death of their husbands. And if 70% of the wealth in the next 10 years, 70% of the wealth is going to be held by women.
By women.
Okay, do the math. There's a couple financial houses, I won't name them, who are saying, And so we've been doing that. We've been condescending in the conversations that we have with women for too long, and now they're going to walk, so we got to figure out what we're going to respond to.
Right.
I would say the second big thing, and this goes to your announcement, is the role of government. So the gender policies of governments are really strong. Right? They're not always implemented well, but they're really strong policies.
For some governments, not
for all. Not for all. Absolutely. But
we should still, praise the ones that have a strong policy in place.
Exactly. And thinking then about how can government up the game in gender lens investing to push for more to sort of engage with the private sector. And I think those two things.
And the government plays a role because there are pension funds. There's government investment through the development finance institutions, the development agencies. There are the purchasing power of governments, $400 billion a year. I mean, that's one critical piece. But just to add a little bit more, the data, the products, the players have evolved over the last 20 years, and in the last 2 years have accelerated so much that now when people said, if I wanted to invest with a gender lens, what could I invest in? Right here in Canada, you have Royal Bank of Canada, and you have BMO, and you have players here that are offering investment products. And then you have people on the venture capital side, the angel investing side, the people who are supporting across every asset class. You have the Omer's pension fund that has backed a public equities gender lens product. So that's another piece of it, is having more product. And then you've got the other piece of it, which is the Women's March, Me Too, Time's Up, the SDGs, SDG 5, and all of the energy of
momentum
UN
is
agencies,
there.
the momentum of
And
people saying, what can I do, and how do we use finance as one tool for social change?
And Joy, you touched on this earlier, like lots of other initiatives. We know that there have been a lot of commitments made over the last couple of days as well, in and around Women Deliver. Jess, you're with the Equality Fund. Tell us what it is, why it's needed. Why do we need an investment fund that's specific to women and girls?
Well, it is, maybe I'll start with the problem we're trying to solve.
Yeah.
Right? So I come from a place where I believe we're at a tipping point, as you both do, and that in order to really create transformative change and get the gender equal world we're trying to build, that we need to invest in the grassroots organizations and movements who are driving change in Canada and around the world, right? And whether these are organizations that are challenging fundamentalist laws or early child marriage traditions, or trying to build a battered women's shelter in the downtown east side of Vancouver, these are the organizations who are vested and who will create ultimately the change that we seek. Yet their average annual budget around the world is $20,000 a year.
Wow.
So I come from a place where I'm trying to, and my job at the Match Fund and now as a co-founder of the Equality Fund, is to try to find a new economic model to back the activists and leaders at the grassroots.
Right.
And so that's what the Equality Fund is. The Equality Fund comes from that purpose, but is trying to disrupt the charity model. Because here in Canada, we're here in Vancouver. It's a beautiful city. There's a lot of wealth in this country and in this city. But if I have to be honest, we aren't there in terms of what people give, right? And where people invest. So the Equality Fund is an opportunity to catalyze and stimulate the Canadian market. And so if I can put it maybe in perspective, you know, the Canadian philanthropy, about 8% of it goes to global causes, right? It's a bit off-brand as a Canadian, right? I feel like we could probably do a little better there. So one can imagine of that 8%, how much is actually going to gender equality? Very little, right? So what we're really trying to do is create an opportunity in Canada to stimulate and catalyze the market. This is where the government comes in. The government yesterday, or was it Sunday? It's been a lot. It's been a lot.
It's been a
5 days in one
exciting
type of
time.
Yeah.
So Justin Trudeau was here on Monday at Women Deliver, but this was on Sunday.
This was on Sunday,
announcement.
and he's been plugging it, and as has the Minister Mariam Mansef, who's responsible for this file, announced a $300 million contribution to the Equality Fund. And what that does is create an opportunity for leverage, right? So that is an invitation for both the philanthropic community and the investment community to come to the table and have their funds matched and have an idea backed by a government who has recently released a feminist international assistance policy and is an explicitly feminist government. And it allows us to sort of credibly unlock new money. So that is a winning recipe we've seen so far. It has stimulated lots of interesting things. We've been able to raise $100 million in philanthropic and investment resources before we even got to the starting line. So I really think I'm with you. It's a moment whose time has come. We are sort of at this fever pitch, and there's a real groundswell built by some of these legends at the table. And this is just a great way for our donors and our stakeholders to get activated in terms of all of their money.
And there's been a big build-up to Women Deliver as well, specifically to make sure that a lot of these announcements are made around this conference because there's so many players and partners in one space, I guess.
You know, I think as you're speaking, we were just talking to some of our partners from Indigenous communities here in Canada, from Alberta, and one of the things that they've said is that they need investment in housing. And right now they have, they're relying on philanthropy, but we need to link them to you. And to your point about why now when women deliver, it's because we're making these connections, and the energy and the collaboration and the transparency. I'm just so excited to be here. And I wanted to follow up from something Susan said about, gender lens, gender smart, and how we're coming at it. So as you mentioned, I lead Merck for Mothers, which is Merck's $500 million commitment to ending preventable maternal deaths worldwide.
And again, this is another announcement that's just been made.
Well, no, so the $500 commitment was made by our CEO. Sorry, $500 million. $500 million, $500 million. Commitment was made in 2011 by our CEO, Ken Frazier.
Okay.
The announcement we made yesterday is our partnership with the U.S. government's Overseas Private Investment Corporation, as well as USAID and Credit Suisse, to mobilize, or we have mobilized, $50 million to think about smart, sustainable ways to invest in local businesses that create sustainable solutions for maternal mortality.
Yay.
And coming back to the gender smart, our entry point is investing in women. And foundationally, investing in women's lives, investing in keeping them alive. And, to your point, Joy, about, why all of this momentum, I do think it's because all of us now are recognizing that keeping women alive, keeping women healthy, making sure women are productive and active, participants in global economies, that's what creates a better tomorrow. And I think that between the work of, all of the community, Joy, I was telling you yesterday, you said we need to stop, kind of proving or trying to prove that this is the right thing to do. Right. But I do think the work that you've all done to prove this is the right thing to do has allowed us to be at this point.
It does seem that there's more of, it's not so much just a moral incentive to use this gender lens, but actually there's an economic incentive as well.
It's really both. It's the right thing to do and it's the smart thing to do.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is that some of the people that you would expect to be, you're going to have to make a really hardcore business case, some of the male CEOs of banks that I talk to and of major financial institutions actually say, you know what, I've got it on the business case. I want to do this because of the moral case. And then some of the people that you would expect to really come from the other side are saying, I have to prove the business case or I'm not going to be taken seriously. And I think we should never make assumptions about where people are coming from. People are coming from a lot of different places in this. One thing I want to say is leadership. That one of the common denominators is we are in positions of increasing leadership, and we're the ones creating this, the leadership that you're representing, and really the people from the constellation of players that have come together, and with this feminist approach to building the fund, not just what it's investing, but how it's investing. And the how is so critical about the who and the tools and the approaches and the thesis. But I think leadership, of course, there's not anywhere near as much women's leadership in who's deploying the capital yet, but this is a shift that's
in the meantime, then, when it is still lots of men in these leadership roles, how do you then approach them when it comes to pushing the case for investing in girls and women?
So one of my strategies over the last 10 years is, particularly for people in finance, people in finance, and particularly, let's say all people in finance, I don't think this is a male-female thing, they want to be right. They make money by being right. They make money by making bets and saying, I saw that before anybody else saw it, and I'm right.
Yeah.
And so if you go in and say, so you know that Me Too thing that just happened? You missed it.
Yeah.
And did your stocks go down? Big mistake. Right? So if you're not paying attention to cultural shifts where nothing changed in any employment policies, there'd been movements behind working on sexual harassment and journalism and all of that had built a lot of momentum. But a significant part of what changed that caused the financial blip that is continuing, it's continuing to go blip, 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 blip. It's not done around Me Too, there was a cultural shift. Yeah. Nobody was expecting, we had heard some statements about boys will be boys. Well, lo and behold, no, we're not okay with being assaulted at work anymore. And the cultural shift that says it's not okay anymore was what nobody had anticipated. And so all of the folks in finance, their job is to anticipate how big is the internet going to get.
Yeah.
Well, how big is women's economic empowerment going to get? Right? Women's economic empowerment is growing equal to China and India combined. If you're missing that trend and the risks that it presents to industries that rely on low-paid wages for women, then you got to move your money to places that have just labor practices.
Yeah.
And what's great to see is, and I'll give another example, is Unilever acquired a company called Shea Moisture last year. And as part of the acquisition, it was a very successful male-led business, but with 2 powerhouse women behind it. And Liberian family that came to the US, built this incredible powerhouse company. As part of the acquisition, they created a $100 million venture fund to invest in women of color entrepreneurs. This is a remarkable thing, not because it was just the right thing to do, but because that's a $150 billion spend in the United States on an annualized basis. And that's another thing. People just don't even think about this, but Unilever did, and Shea Moisture could see it. And so they know their customer base, they know their supply chain. They're building their supply chain, they're building their customer base. And so people are coming at this from a value creation standpoint as much as, again, wow, women of color entrepreneurs get less than 0.2% of venture capital. This is something that has to get fixed. And so it's both and that's 2 guys that really were behind making that happen.
And Susan, related to your point about leadership, I do think that because there's growing women's leadership around this, the issue around risk and tolerance for risk and the recognition between the relationship of risk and opportunity, that's really what's driving a lot of this work, I feel, and what's exciting is because unless we create those opportunities like the Equality Fund is doing, we're not, we're not going to have a transformative effect.
Yeah, it does seem that you've got, Wall Street corporations involved. You've got the political will there in some places as well. I mean, there's lots of different players who are involved in, whether it be the Equality Fund or Merck for Mothers. How have you found bringing all those different players into one room, one space?
It was fascinating at the announcement on Sunday because it was led by women, and there was a lot of emotion in the room, and we really actually just owned it.
Powerful.
It was a very powerful moment. But what has struck me, I think the biggest lesson that I will take away from having constructed the Equality Fund from the beginning with my co-founders is that there are feminists everywhere, and there are people willing to work in new ways everywhere. And I have seen that in the Royal Bank of Canada. I have seen that in venture capital institutions. I have seen that in community philanthropy. I have seen that amongst high net worth philanthropists. And they are doing the job of evangelizing impact investing for gender and evangelizing the idea of moving money and through a feminist lens. And they're handling their people.
Can I
add? Pursuit.
No,
Too many people want to get in.
I wanted to add something because, and to bring the challenge of implementation onto the table.
Yes.
Because I think it's exciting that we have all of this financing kind of waiting at the starting line.
All these commitments.
Exactly, but they need to be matched, with the investees, and it needs to be implemented in a way that's going to have impact. And to your question about government partnership, so Merck for Mothers has had lots of experience with public-private partnerships, working with government, and they only work when you come to the table together at the co-creation, co-design phase, and work together through all the warts, of getting it right.
And one of the things that got announced, another thing that got announced last night is the Invest to Impact initiative from the 2X Challenge. So FinDev Canada, OPIC in the US, who's also been involved with you, CDC in the UK, MasterCard Foundation, have come together to say we want to find the pipeline of women entrepreneurs in Africa and really use our convening power, our influence to not only surface pipeline for ourselves of investable women entrepreneurs on the continent, but also to telegraph that other investors are interested and to unlock other private capital to come in with us. And so that is part of the picture. FinDev Canada also announced a relationship with UN Women to look at Latin America, doing gender lens investing in Latin America, as well as the continent. There were so many pieces of the puzzle that were there from Southeast Asia to Latin America to things that are happening. Your work is global.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me, and sometimes it's not so obvious that we all speak the same language.
It's not.
We are rapidly running out of time, ladies, but one of the things that we're asking everyone at this conference is how will you use your power? It's actually, what will you do with your power? It's actually written behind us there. I mean, it's pretty obvious what you guys are doing. but what do you take forward from this then?
So just to give you our announcement from last night.
Yeah, of course.
Because I think it's part of this how.
Yes.
Which is thinking about, so we launched a campaign 2 years ago to prove that you can use finance to address gender-based violence. And part of that was about building a broader set of opportunities to move capital to, right? So if you care about gender issues and you care about women's leadership, but you also care about things like gender-based violence, what do I invest in, right? So we have now gone past, we have a goal of $1 trillion, but we have gone past $500 billion in pension funds, philanthropists, private individuals, foundations who say, we wish our underlying investments were addressing gender-based violence.
Yeah.
So we're taking that $1 trillion and then walking over to the finance people and saying, look, $1 trillion. Then, really importantly, and this is how the implementation needs to happen, we're going to this world. We're going to women's rights activists, people who know about gender-based violence. And over the last 2 years, we've worked with hundreds of them to build 60 ideas that are implementable within finance, marrying them together and say, here's the idea. Now, finance people, go do your job and build a product to the people who want it.
And
You have
target
to be
it.
very brief, but go on, go ahead.
No, just target it to where it's needed,
Exactly.
because different types of financing are needed for different stages of the organization's growth. But to your question,
How will you use your power?
so, the power of Merck for Mothers really is how do we demonstrate the role of private sector for scaling these sustainable solutions? Because if we don't have sustainable solutions, we're not going to get to our 2030 targets. And I'm just excited to work with all of you here to make that happen.
Okay, well, it's been such a privilege and pleasure to talk to you all. Well done for all the work that you're all doing in gender smart investing, or the gender lens, or however we want to use the jargon around it. To all of the viewers, thank you for watching as well. This has been Newswatch. My thanks then to Suzanne, to Joy, Jess, and to Marianne. And see you next time.
Thank you. The how.